Hi, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. And wherever you are listening to this wonderful LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, and Twitter Live, I have a really special guest today. We're actually talking about using wisdom to power the future. And a little bit of a quote before I actually go live and introduce Mike Stevenson to this live broadcast is just want to relate to something that I just read is sometimes people use age as a convenient excuse. I'm too old to start, sometimes new, or I couldn't learn that at my age. Other people, though, go on to achieve their greatest accomplishments in life in later years. So we're talking about wisdom, we're talking about age, we're talking about knowledge transfer, and it doesn't really matter whatever age you are. So, Mike, I'm just going to add you in. So, Mike, you're very welcome.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
The reason why I invited you on today is you did a post a couple of weeks ago, and that really sort of intrigued me. And I really we connected. I think we're already connected anyway, and we had a little conversation offline about this subject, about wisdom and knowledge, and how it can power the future. But before we go to that, Mike, would you just quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, I am now someone who, speaks for a living. I've been doing it on stage for a few years, but I also work with organizations to help to propel them forward, and that involves their people, involves getting the message right, all of those things. But it's come from a long time. Because I'm 70 now. I'm going to say this right up front. I don't feel it. I hope I don't look it. But I really, want to get this message across that what I bring is a huge amount of experience. I was chucked out of school at 15. I had a terrible childhood. I ended up sleeping out in London for a while. I had multiple jobs. I busked in Dublin. I worked in steel, the building trade, the catering trade, the biscuit production, wine bottling. So I had an enormous amount of experience. My education came later. But I have to say that what my education taught me was that education validates real life. It's not, it's not opening up a whole new stream of knowledge. It is the knowledge that you've already acquired, and your curiosity allows it to open up a whole vista of new learning. But then I went into business much later at the age of 43. I had a very successful business, and I lost it in the recession. So Thinktastic, which is my business, which is basically me at the moment, was born out of a need to attack the doom and gloom that settled after the recession. And of course, now we're coming through a pandemic, and I feel that I have skills to offer, and knowledge to offer, and energy to offer. Now, energy and OD are not two things that you normally associate.
Yeah, we discussed that a little bit beforehand, and we were speaking about mobile phones, and we were speaking about technology and other things like that. Like, it doesn't matter, technology you can pick up at any age, but the power to move and change people by the stories that we share is hugely powerful, regardless of what age. But it's the wonderful thing that we spoke about is how the stories can move us, but engage people regardless of the age. And I think you were saying about the keynote presentations you did in the past.
Yeah, well, let me just tell you this story, because it really lifted me in a way that I hadn't been lifted before. I was speaking to young people who'd been through a difficult time. And before I left, this young girl, she was 15, she came forward and she gave the organizer a yellow sticky, and she said, "That man has just changed my life." Now, I had to leave, so I have no idea in what way I changed her life. But what I did do was, to open up the possibility that being young these are not the best days of your life, and that the best is yet to come. And I also talked about some of the pressures of being young. You know, people tell you what you can't do. You feel, people make you feel worthless. Teachers have dissed you because you don't fit into the compliant model of education, all those things. And that really resonated with her, I think. And, you know, it is important that young people get a sense that the best is yet to come. And when you're able to explain it in terms of your own story, it really does have an impact. And I have had from multiple parents, when I've done school events, you know, parents writing to me saying, you have made such a huge difference to my son or daughter, because you gave them a sense that they have worth, and that the worth might be brought out, you know, not now, but in the future.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. So we're talking today really regarding using wisdom to power the future. Like, wisdom is an area of knowledge. Doesn't matter what age you are, you're either wise or you're not, or you come up with a whole lot of knowledge. And like, from where you've come from, and how you've excelled from sleeping on the streets of London, and then before you knew it, you got yourself back on track. So I'm interested to see how you can inspire people now that, you know, it doesn't matter, you might fail at a younger age, but you can learn from that and propel yourself forward to get success, because we can all get success.
Yeah, well, I couldn't be doing what I'm doing if I hadn't had the experiences I've had. So, you know, I was beaten, I was battered, I was spat on, I was rejected, I was failed at school. So all of those things leave you with a sense that you are utterly worthless. So when you begin to open up and find your personality away from all the pressure, you discover talents, you discover you know, abilities, you discover that you have got a personality that people like. You discover that you can influence people around you. And it's amazing, the learning that you can acquire through failure. And well, the word failure is a strange one in a sense, because you know, footballers don't talk about failure, they talk about losing. And when you lose, you go back and you want to try and win. And I remember speaking to Alex Ferguson, who was manager of Manchester United, and he talks about success being the threat, because when you're doing well, you stop growing. Does that make sense? And how you keep people motivated to keep going and growing and exceeding your past performance is really difficult when you're winning. So, you know, in sport, they don't talk about failure. They talk about, you know, losing. Now, we all lose sometimes, but you have to realize that if you make a mistake, then that mistake has taught you something. It's taught you something huge. And, you know, would you do it again in the same way? Well, no, you wouldn't. So unless you learn from those things that go wrong, then you're being caught in a trap, in a kind of slough of despond. And, you know, you need a couple of early victories, you know. And I found redemption because, and actually it was Ireland that redeemed me, and I'll tell you very briefly how that happened. I was sleeping out, and during the day, people would come down from all over to see the hippies in the West in Piccadilly Circus. Now, I wasn't a hippie. I was someone who was, you know, I didn't have a place to stay. But people would come up to you and they would talk to you because it was like a fascination. You know, I'm going down to the circus to talk to hippies today, and you would get these young, you know, private school people coming in. You would get girls of 17 and 18 who wanted to take photographs of you, who'd been seen with you. And it was an astonishing thing that one minute you were a liability, you were a worthless piece of scum, and then during the day you were someone who aroused curiosity. So I got talking to this guy, and he said, you know, do you play a musical instrument? I said, well, I learned to play the guitar when I was at school, although it was never at school that I learned to play the guitar. It was the times outside where I was fantasizing about being a member of the Beatles and the Stones.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And he brought me a guitar. And he says, I think you should have this. And then a Japanese television company came running over and they say, and they wanted to film me singing a song. So I sang Catch the Wind by Donovan. And apparently, I was shown, it was called East Meets West. And I was shown in Japan. But I've never seen that piece of film. But anyway, that guitar, I started playing it. And suddenly I had admirers, people are saying, "Oh, that's really good. You're good at playing the guitar and you can sing a bit." So then I met a guy who said, "Why don't you come to Dublin? And why don't you busk there? We don't have any guitarists busking in Dublin at the time." That's how long ago it was, by the way. So I did that. So I escaped, off the streets, and I went to Dublin and I set up busking at the top of Grafton Street. And I, earned a reputation. I built friendships. I attracted large crowds. I was actually featured by the Irish Times at one stage. I remember them coming to take a photograph. And I made friends with, Phil Lynott and Brian Downey from the newly formed Thin Lizzy. So that was me suddenly realizing that all the things I've been told at school were profoundly wrong. I was a performer. I had talent. And, that was my breakthrough. And people will have their own breakthrough. But, astonishing that if I'd listened to all those people who had informed my childhood and my early teens, I would have just drowned in despair. But they were wrong.
I totally agree. Sometimes when the older generation, that when you were young, should have been there to inspire you and motivate you and brought you forward. And that sometimes doesn't happen, well, especially in the school area. The one person that inspired me when I was younger was my athletics coach. And he really inspired me to achieve because he wanted me to do well. And I still remember that for today. But I think we need these pearls of wisdom now to sort of educate and stimulate. Now's the right time to actually change. Now's the actual right time to do something. From what you've said is, we all get challenges at times. We all get times in our life where we look through rose-tinted glass when we look back in our life and say our 20s were fantastic. But really, in reality, some of it was quite challenging. So we discussed a little bit of that in detail before we got on.
Yeah. Look, we hear it now. We hear people of my age and younger, to be honest, saying, young folk, they're all snowflakes. And I think, what are you talking about? We are living through a period of change, enormous change. And, it is almost all for the good.
Yeah.
Set aside your prejudices and think back. When I was young, people were dying of TB, people had polio. So don't forget that. Don't forget the fact that there was entertainment was very limited. I had a small black and white television when I was when the family had one when I was 11. So we didn't have television before that at all. So we had to make our own entertainment. But young people are also making their own entertainment because they're using the power of digital technology to build global friendships. Well, we couldn't have that. One of the things I discovered in sleeping out, and this thing during the day in Piccadilly Circus, where people would come from all over to see the hippies, of which I was mistakenly identified, was that I met people from France and Sweden and Denmark and America. And that was hugely valuable, and it was exciting. It was really exciting to meet, people from different parts of the world who'd assembled to London as part of this, this growing love movement. When they wore flowers in their hair and they would sit around, smoking peace pipes and whatever else they could stick.
Or whatever they were smoking.
Yeah. And it was lovely. But, young people don't need that now because they have got connection. They understand the world. And the things they are talking about are global challenges. Don't try and tell me that young people are snowflakes when it is they who are really driving the climate change agenda, driving the move against, the horrible, toxic sexual politics that we had when we were young. But I was expected as a boy to approach girls and chat them up. I was never good at that. Never good at that. And that was a pressure on me as a young man. It was a horrible pressure. I remember someone saying, when you get married and you get a really good job, and I was terrified by that, particularly when I was thrown out of school, because I thought then my life had ended, in terms of this vista of, successful relationship, house, all of those things. So I thought I'd missed out, like a number of people now do when they're young. And actually, the way the economics of the nation, at least over in the UK, has gone, young people won't be able to afford houses, which is an absurdity. And then we talk about the housing ladder. So it's all about this climb, that the economic model allows you to take a step on the bottom of the ladder and work your way up. Well, I don't accept that premise. Why should you start at the bottom of the ladder? Why should you, not wait to be heard, or wait to be heard only when you're 40, when you've got, accumulated wisdom and experience? Well, it's not true. Young people have a lot of wisdom, and they've got a lot of, ideas about what they want the future to look like. And, by and large, they are absolutely spot on.
Yeah. I totally concur with exactly what you've said. It is the power of the future. We've actually got Alan Hennessy just come up online, says, "Hi guys, Mike is an amazing guest, a very interesting conversation." So and geography is history, and the world is our oyster now. And I totally agree with that. Like, we're so connected now. Like, I probably wouldn't have connected with yourself and learning from you since we've had this pandemic, and the world seems to be even closer now, which is awesome. So we're talking about how wisdom can power the future, regardless of age. But when we come to a certain age, some people just leave people out to rot because they don't feel that we have much to offer. But when you're still continuously learning, you're still continuously growing. For me, I've got 4 books ready to read this week. I'm still engaging my brain. I'm learning loads, and I'm still got so much more to offer. And for yourself, you got so much more. You got loads of pearls of wisdom, regardless of age. And it's good to sort of educate the generation X, Z, Y, whatever number it is now. I don't know what number it is, but there's that connectivity where you can pass that knowledge forward.
Oh, listen, absolutely. When I'm speaking, which is what I normally do, and I speak on stage. Now, of course, I've had to adapt, which I've been able to do, for goodness sake. But the audiences that I get the most enthusiastic feedback from are young people, because I'm not lecturing them. I'm not actually trying to teach them. I'm just showing them that they've got this huge potential, that they're not lazy. Because one student asked me once, and I think it was at Stirling University, he said, "My generation have been described as lazy." And I said, "You're not lazy. You've just got a different way of going about your daily life, and it doesn't involve going out and sawing wood. It's different. You're not lazy. You're acquiring knowledge. You're acquiring ideas." And it's those same young people did not want to go to the traditional industry of financial services, because I remember one bank was there trying to tout for new recruits, and they rejected the idea because at the time they felt the financial services industry had let them and their parents down, and they were right. Let's be honest. So they had very clear ideas about what they wanted to do, and they were more concerned, or are more concerned, about going into a job that does something of benefit to society, of benefit to the environment. And they see money as the consequence of doing something right and doing the right thing, rather than, pursuing money as an end in itself, which I've never done. And I'll tell you a brief story, and this is really about the wisdom of age. When I was sleeping out, one of the prized locations for a night of, comfortable sleep was a toilet in Piccadilly Circus, believe it or not. And every night I would try and get in there, and every night it was full up. Every door was shut. And one night I saw a cubicle at the end, and I opened it, and it was empty. So I sat down, and I was trying to position my head, on one side of the pipe behind the WC. And then, about 5-10 minutes in, there was a knock on the door. And this voice said, "Excuse me, do you mind if I share your room for the night?" And I thought, my God, someone's going to walk in with pinstripe suits and Prince Neon and an umbrella. And it was an old guy who looked like the archetypical vagrant.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about, long beard. And I said, "Of course, you come in." And he sat, crossways. And he told me this story. And then the story goes like this. He was a very successful man, lived in just outside Stanmore in Middlesex with his wife and small child. And he would lavishly bestow on his wife and child, these expensive gifts, because he was very rarely at home. And one day he bought a sports car for his wife. I think it was a Jaguar E-Type.
Mm-hmm.
And, she came out, he rang the bell, she came out, and he says, "Look, darling, this is your birthday present." And he says, "Why don't you take the little one out for a drive?" So she got in, she went out for a drive, she never returned because the car was, demolished by a tree, and so were their lives.
Yeah.
And after that, he threw away the keys for his house and he went on the road. And he'd been doing it ever since. And he said, "I am at ease with what I'm doing because I lost the most important thing to me. I didn't realize what the most important thing to me was until I'd lost them." And that was his wife, his family, basically. And he'd been doing that ever since. And he said to me, whatever you do with your life, never forget what really matters to you. And don't sell yourself to the god of money, because it is destructive. It loses track of who you are. And I've kept that all my life, and I'm not wealthy now. In fact, I'm needing work at the moment. So that was hugely influenced. That was a man, I think, in his 60s at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was 16 at the time. So there you are. That was a hugely influential moment. And when he told me the story, I was in tears, and he asked me, what do I value? And I said, well, I like music, I like people. And those are the two things that have dominated my life ever since.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, we just got a message here from Alan. If you know him, age shouldn't be no barrier to learning, as we should always improve. The youngsters can learn from our experience. I'm 61. And we can certainly learn from their tech knowledge, but also their attitudes towards the environment, their enthusiasm, their youthful inexperience, and their lack of baggage. That's wonderful. That's really cool. So yeah, again, wisdom comes from all different sources. Obviously, technology moves, and sometimes we have to move with the technology. I actually quite like technology, so I get engaged with it. So I always like shiny objects. So I keep signing up for stuff and go, "Oh no, I don't actually need that," and I get overwhelmed with too much. But I think the pearls of wisdom can come from any age, but it's how we can feed that forward to help people grow and learn, because it's all about that, and it's mutual for both of us, and how we can engage in that.
Yeah, I mean, what Alan refers to, I think, is that young people have got this huge amount of energy and enthusiasm, and we've got to tap into that. We've got to, really see them as the future, but they're also the present. And I want to be working with them to add my tuppence worth. But I'll tell you what my tuppence worth isn't, and that is, this is the way we do things. Don't change the record. Don't, don't do things differently, because this is the way we work. This is the way that's always worked. And this kind of money set, I've got money as an obsession, this kind of mindset, which, I met Carol Dweck, who was a professor at Stanford University. We were sharing a stage in Glasgow, and she talks about those people that had it easy getting into Stanford, and they were the ones that struggled because they suddenly found themselves at ground zero. Whereas the ones that had struggled to get in there, the ones that had made mistakes, the ones that had learnt from the errors of their ways, the ones who'd worked hard into the night, they were the ones that excelled because they were used to making those strides on a daily basis. And, people of my age who dismiss the ideas of the young and the experience of the young are daft. And I want them to put, a blanket over their head and rethink, because this kind of fixed mindset, this, we have the answers, and young people don't understand, that by the time they get to my age, they will realize that it's all a waste of time. I've heard that recently. What an astonishingly close-minded thing to say to young people. So I encourage them. And, the wisdom that we talk about is me having an open mind and having the experience and be able to marry the experience I've had to where they are. If you don't have that kind of empathy, that ability to step into their shoes, you don't have wisdom to offer, because wisdom comes with recognizing that you're always learning. And, I love learning. I love, a shiny new thing for me is an insight in a book. It's a pearl of wisdom. And of course, I love technology. I find it harder because I have to spend longer to acquire the knowledge, because I speak a different language. I was growing up with a different language. So I have to try and learn a new language. It's like, learning Mandarin Chinese in your 60s. It's more difficult. A 4-year-old will pick it up like that. And interestingly, boys learn Mandarin Chinese much more easily than girls, because it's got the graphics element of it. There's a hugely visual part to this. So, we are living in an age where we're going to see enormous change. I'm excited by it, and I want to be part of that change, not holding it back, not, laboring with the past, not, taking the acceleration to a new world as a threat. It's not a threat. It's an opportunity. So that's the wisdom of the experience I've had, is, wherever you are, there's a better way of doing things.
I completely concur. Absolutely everything you said. That's why I resonated with you when we initially spoke. I think that's hugely powerful, and I love that. That's really, really cool. We've got some really good, wonderful conversations within the chat, completely concurring with what you say. I think as long as we keep learning, regardless of our age, doesn't matter. There's a thing, the neurons that wire together, fire together. And as long as you're keeping yourself in an experience and you experience something new every day, you help yourself learn and you help yourself grow, whatever that might look and feel like. So there's huge amount of knowledge and wisdom. Like I think we could have carried this on for a couple of hours actually talking like this. So Mike, I really thank you for jumping on today and sharing your wisdom and sharing your stories, because it's hugely powerful. So how can people find out more about you? I put something down there.
Yes, there's thinktastic.co.uk. There's also MikeStevenson.net, which is my speaker site. And I'm on LinkedIn.
If we have any questions, if someone wants to put any comments up there, Alan Hensey just said, wow, an amazing story. Life will pass you by. Learning is powerful. So wisdom is a memory with the emotion. Arousal turned down, not age specific. That's really awesome. Sorry, I didn't put Alan's up. He would kill me if he didn't put it up. So Alan, that's learning is powerful. And I know Alan's on the same wavelength as myself. Look, if there's any other questions that people want to post, because we do believe that learning is powerful regardless of what age. like in my 40s, I went back to college and then went back to university. I had to relearn how to write paragraphs and sentences and all of that. But, you know, that just comes with practice. And I've done it twice since then. So it's hugely powerful. So, Mike, wonderful conversation today. And any last pearl of wisdom that you can share with us before we say goodbye?
Yes, just taste life. So the thing that really gets me is people say, I don't do opera or I don't do football. Go and experience it. Yep. Don't say I don't like foreign food. I mean, I've heard this even recently. What an absurd thing to say. Stimulate your taste buds. Yep. Stimulate your senses, because if you go out for a walk, you will probably find if you go the same route every day, you don't see anything. You don't experience it. Take your camera out. See life outside as a tourist and use those senses, and change the food that you buy. Try something new all the time. That's what keeps me going. If I had the same habits, for the last 40 years, I would be as dead as a donkey, to be honest. So people say great habits. I actually don't like habits. I think when anything becomes a habit, you begin to narrow your horizons. So forget the 6 habits of highly successful people. The habit should be to constantly explore, constantly enlarge your environment, your horizon, and taste new things, hear new things, go to new experiences. That's where I get my enthusiasm from.
You're on exactly the same wavelength as myself. That's exactly how I think and do. That's why I really enjoyed this conversation, because your mindset is fairly similar to mine. I experienced new countries, post-COVID anyway, new foods. I love hearing new music and all of that. So just one little quote that I've got here. The more experienced you are, the more skills that you can bring to a new job or career or whatever, or profession. Age can actually work in your favor. And that was a quote by John Allen. Another one, I believe we can keep ourselves young by surrounding ourselves with things that make us feel young. And exactly what you said. So, Mike, thank you so much for today. It's been absolutely awesome. And I'm sure we'll enjoy our future conversations like that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.